The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com and IgnitionAPG.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 51. Iron Game Chalk Talk is a weekly podcast where I bring you experts in the field of strength and conditioning to talk about various topics. If you've not already done so, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube, as well as join our mailing list at ronmckeefery.com to get updates each week on the latest episodes. Also on ronmckeefery.com is the show notes for this episode, as well as any of the other episodes that we've shot, that you can have quick access to any links or resources that we mention. This week, I'm excited to have David Tenney with us. David is the Sports Science and Performance Manager for the Seattle Sounders of the MLS. He's one of the most progressive and most respected coaches in MLS, and came across him a couple years ago, and he puts on a clinic each year, a summit each year. And it's just been very well received, very well respected. And I wanted to have him on the show just to talk a little bit about his career, the path that he's taken to get to where he's at, how he's kind of modeled his program after the high performance model that's very common in the Olympic sport countries. And just a little bit about his programming for soccer. It's just a sport that I personally have not had a lot of experience with, and I wanted to share that with any of the coaches out there that are specifically working with soccer or have the opportunity to work with soccer in the future. Before we get going, I want to make sure we recognize our sponsors, EliteForm.com and IgnitionAPG.com. Both are fantastic companies that have taken it upon themselves to sponsor the show and help bring this show to you guys for free. If you get an opportunity at one of these conferences that are coming up, or just going through their social media sites, please reach out to them and tell them how much you appreciate them being involved with the show. It wouldn't be possible without them. Ignition is a sports performance company based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, where I got a chance to get to know them a lot better last year being with the Bengals. And being able to go over to their sports, their speed certification, and be involved with their latest process of coming up with a sports supplement line. They really have their hands in a lot of different cookie jars and are doing their part to continue to bring great products and great training with a overall message to do it the right way. And that's all you can really ask for anymore, is for companies to be legit, be transparent with their values and their ethics and the way that they go about doing things. And Ignition does a fantastic job, and they're doing a great job with their various high school and collegiate athletes, as well as their pro player training that they have. They just recently had their latest speed certification, and if you have not checked that out, they're one of the few speed certifications out there, and so I would encourage you to reach out to Ignition and follow up about that. But overall, just getting involved or having an opportunity to clinic with these guys is a fantastic opportunity, so I'd encourage you to do that. Lastly, if you enjoy these episodes, I know you'll enjoy strength-ondemand.com. Strength On Demand is an online archive of strength and conditioning clinic presentations that myself and Rob Taylor put together. It was a product that we created because we wanted it. It was just being able to access different strength and conditioning presentations on your time from anywhere with a Wi-Fi connection is ideal. And we're always constantly looking for those opportunities to continue to learn, and we thought that this would be the best way to do that. So check out Strength Dash on Demand. All right, excited to get to David. David is a fantastic person, and he shares a ton of information in this episode. So I know you'll get a lot out of it. Grab a notepad and a pen, sit back and enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the flip side. All right, guys, real excited to have David Tenney with us today. David's well, shoot, I want to make sure I get your title right. It's a long one. Sports Science and Performance Manager for the Seattle Sounders out there, and real gracious to spend some time with us today. So I appreciate it, buddy.
No, thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me on.
Dave, for the guys that don't know you as well, could you go into a little bit of your journey, how you got into strength and conditioning, and then maybe some of the mentors you've had along the way, and how you got to your current position?
Yeah. Well, I mean, probably 15 years ago, I never actually thought I'd be to where I am now. So had a minor league playing career, I guess, with soccer. Played with minor leagues in Germany, a little bit indoor soccer. Didn't make a whole lot of money, kind of barely scraped by. Decided to go back to George Mason University. Went in the Masters in Exercise Science at George Mason University. And thought that I was probably just going to go maybe the youth soccer coaching route. Got hooked up with the women's professional team at the time, the Washington Freedom. And myself and the other assistant coach for the Freedom did a course in Prague in the Czech Republic. European A license course, and the Eastern European countries. It was really just stroke of luck. Just happened to go to these Eastern European soccer coaches. It was actually a 2-month-long course, living in Prague for 2 months, and the level of physiology and the level of periodization and building microcycles and the mixture of the energy systems along with the technical and tactical training. It was something that it just kind of clicked with me. Came back and then did that more with the women, did that with George Mason University, and then after finishing the Masters and moving on into MLS from there with Kansas City in 2007. So I like to say there was this kind of planned career down the road, but I think an opportunity presented itself. I saw kind of a new layer of kind of physical demands over top of the technical and tactical demands in Europe and the Czech Republic, and just kind of flowed from there. So
Sure. I know you spent quite time overseas, and something that we've talked a lot about on the show is that high performance model. That a lot of countries, a lot of Olympic sport countries are using, and I know you've kind of taken that and implemented it into where you're currently at. Talk a little bit about that model and fitness coach versus strength coach, and where should we even be called strength and conditioning coaches anymore?
I think there's definitely a place for the strength conditioning coach, and I think that it's sports specific a little bit. I mean, I was really lucky to spend the off season in Australia. I visited Darren Burgess in Adelaide and a couple AFL teams in Sydney and Melbourne. And the way they struck their infrastructure, I guess, is different, but I really like it. And I think the role of the strength coach is extremely important. But I don't think that the role of the strength coach should be in isolation of the rest of the coaching staff, I think. And so the role of the fitness coach within soccer, it's very much looking at physical loading of what's going on the field versus physical loading of what's going on in the weight room. And the high performance model, I think, looks at physical demands and physical load of training sessions in the field as well as in the weight room. You have the high performance manager, which really is overseeing the infrastructure of what's going on in the weight room with the strength conditioning coach, as well as a sports scientist that's quantifying what's going on workload-wise in the field, and then communicating with the coaching staff to find this optimal training solution between the field and the weight room. So I don't think it should diminish the role of the strength coach at all, because I think it's an extremely valuable role. But I just think down the road we have to kind of merge the two of those together and not work in isolation.
Absolutely. No, I agree 100%. As a fitness coach, you made a lot of not necessarily noise, but you spent there was quite a bit of write-ups about you when, stressing aerobic training more so than glycolytic training.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your conditioning model and why the importance or the emphasis on aerobic training.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the demands of many sports, and a whole lot of the energy supply within those sports is provided by the aerobic system. Typically, those also happen to be between moments when you're working very intensely. So, I think that when people sit down and think about it, they realize the aerobic system is quite important. But I also think there's kind of a semantics, and there's definitely some real negative connotations on aerobic training, and everyone thinks that means going out on 5-mile runs and slogging these, through the woods or in the street or whatever. And that's not really the essence of aerobic training. I mean, aerobic training is the ability to aerobically recover between intense bouts of activity, exercise, explosive actions, and if you are only reliant on glycolysis to provide all that energy, eventually you'll just blow up and lactate over time.
Right.
So at some point we have to be able to recover from those bouts. Most of that recovery is very aerobically based. And obviously you look at, along the time when I was talking about the aerobic side, you have Joel Jamison's book, coming out, and kind of I think he explains that very well within that book is that the aerobic system is kind of that underpinning structure that provides for recovery from strength and power throughout a match.
Sure. No, Joel's putting out some great stuff right now, isn't he?
Yeah, for sure.
The the in-season soccer tempo, you guys are in season. Talk a little bit about the schedule, and then I know when dealing with professional athletes in general, and especially athletes from different countries, various backgrounds, training backgrounds, things along those lines, you almost got to trick them in the loading and things. What are some of the tactics that you're using to get your athletes to lift and then all the other components of athleticism?
Yeah, I mean, culture. A lot of coaches talk about mentality and culture, and I think that building culture within your club, within your organization, goes a long ways towards getting the buy-in and getting the compliance that you want. I think that there has to be trust. When I look sometimes, I go, what's happening collegiate level. I think that there's times in college where there can be a disconnect in some collegiate programs within soccer between the strength conditioning staff and the soccer coaching staff in our particular sport. So there has to be a trust and buy-in from the coaching staff and the players towards what we're doing. And then I think that the players have to know that what we're doing in the weight room is complementing what we're doing on the field. So again, it's not in isolation. Mm-hmm. And I think we sell that within our culture very well. Our main starting point, I think, if you look at our kind of periodization model, is that in some ways we're unique. Soccer is unique in MLS in that we start our preseason January 25th. First league match is March 7th. Playoffs start roughly November 1st. The MLS Cup final, if you make it that far, is December 6th or 7th. It's a pretty long season.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the past, we've ended our season, our playoff run, somewhere in mid-November, which gives you somewhere 8 to 9 weeks to really have an off season, which is extremely short. But if you look at, let's say, the European model, a lot of what's going on in Europe, they have even shorter. They might have 6 weeks in the summer and maybe 2 to 3 weeks in the winter. Mm-hmm. So the 9 weeks, even though it's a short block in comparison to most American sports, we can give them 2 to 3 weeks off where they do nothing. And because soccer is obviously a very metabolically demanding sport, and we focus in that after the first 2 to 3 weeks off after the season is 4 to 5 weeks of maximum intensity, higher volume strength work. Because in essence, that's the only time period over the course of the year that we can have some higher volumes of maximal strength work. And then for the most part, we're trying to to get back some of the strength and power gains we've lost over the season.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get players to buy into that portion of the periodization model, which for the most part we do, then they're more likely to in season embrace some of the the heavier lifting, I think.
Right.
So typically we have one particular day a week where we will have a second weight training session, say 3 hours after we end the field session. And then a second time during the week or a third time during the week, we'll have maybe a short 25 to 30 minute session right at the conclusion of training. So we hope to get in between 2 to 3 times during the week, but one main loading day that's usually typically 3 to 4 days out from the last game and 3 to 4 days before the next game. So so as long as and again we have to really kind of progress the volume and intensity of that as well. Again, because if we have some players like you're saying from different cultures, they might struggle with the idea of that at some point. I mean, I think what we've done very, very well is we have three groups we typically lift together. We have our group, about a third of the group that went to a very, very good NCAA collegiate program. They've got a high work capacity. They're used to lifting heavy. They don't get sore when they lift heavy. That's also the group that's the most compliant and lifts the heaviest in the off season. And they can do some work. We can do 4 or 5 sets of a trap bar deadlift and some stuff like that. So we'll do that. And then we have our group that maybe are younger foreign players that they wouldn't do so well with 5 sets of a heavy trap bar deadlift yet.
Right.
So we're really progressing technique, intensity, volume with that group. And then you have a separate group, because within our sport you've got, especially with some of the older professional players, guys with past growing issues, sports hernia issues. We get within our league guys that are all sorts of beat up in different ways.
Right.
A third group that is a little bit more geared around their injury past, more individualized and preventative. We lift heavy with that group when we can, but some of them might have limitations. They might be a player in their early 30s from Latin America that might be a very good pro, but has been beat up and might be limited in what he can do. So those are 3 groups that we try to keep on relatively different periodization models over the course of the year. So.
And you mentioned your trap bar deadlift and max effort work. I mean, what are some of the evaluation from a strength standpoint? What are you testing when an athlete comes in, a new athlete comes into your program? Besides, let's go ahead and go everything and not just strength.
Yeah. I mean, within professional soccer, there's very little in terms of max strength evaluation. I think it's really, we're not looking at 1 rep maxes at all. We're looking at maybe some 5 rep max work on a trap bar. Upper body, you see most guys. I mean, obviously we come in, we're going to do FMS, we're going to do vertical leap, we're going to do 505 agility, we do 30-meter sprint, as well as all of our conditioning tests. We're currently using the OptiJump technology as well. So now we're looking at some single leg jump protocols to really look at right-left difference. And then really, it's not a 1 rep max and retesting over the course of the year. It's trying to progress guys from year to year and what they're doing, what they're putting on the bar from 3 to 5 reps and tracking that. So
right. I've read a lot and following you from afar, about the injury prevention model and how how you've used technology really very strongly, Omegawave and HRV and polar heart rate and Catapult and for somebody that's just getting into all that, and really doesn't have a reference point to, what would be your recommendations in terms of using technology and how best to learn technology and implement it into your program?
I think just grab some. I mean, I think everyone has to grab maybe one piece of technology and just collect a lot of data on it. And is that Bioforce or and Omegawave actually with their new consumer models are starting to be more affordable, especially for individual athlete or small groups. Collect data. I think the biggest mistake that people make is they buy one piece of technology and then they try to draw too many conclusions too quickly from that data. So buy utilize something you think is useful for you and your sport, your clientele, your athlete. Collect a whole lot of data over maybe 6 months. I think we're all seeing that the ability to deal with data, use some different statistical packages. I mean, I think the average strength coach from 10, 15 years ago, is going to have to do more kind of continuing education on their own when it's coming to visualizing data, dealing with data, running some regressions, and what different software that they're using that are more readily available right now.
Yeah.
And just try to learn. I mean, we've been able to piece together. I mean, it's you might look at our model and say, well, you guys have this injury prediction model, but it was more by necessity over time because we, 2009 we're using polar heart rate technology, and then late 2009 we're putting in Omegawave, and then 2011 we're throwing in GPS, and then this year we're using OptiJump and fatigue science, sleep stuff, and there's a certain point where I realized that we have so much stuff here that's we really need to figure out what's interacting with what. And I brought in Ravi Ramanani, who's used to work for Microsoft, is now our kind of data analyst and data scientist, because there's a certain point where us as even if we're very well versed in data, there's a point where it's even too much for us to handle, especially with all the other jobs and responsibilities we have over the course of the day. So at the end of the day, we have to create a simplified message that gets back to our athletes and coaches, and I think that's really important to maintain.
Absolutely.
I utilize help that I have to help me correlate everything and create these simplified messages. So don't drown yourself in data. Don't try to make too fast conclusions. Get help when you need to, and still realize that our messages are simple. And I think that's our injury analysis. An injury prediction, risk analysis, whatever you want to call it. It's basically, what are we trying to look at? We're trying to look at, we are applying a load or different loads, and who's tolerating those loads, who's getting better from those loads, and who's not tolerating those loads.
Right.
That's really all we're trying to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have some more tools to help quantify that. And you can drown yourself in all the data and get lost in it if you're not careful. You move along too fast. I mean, we've tried to add pieces in and utilize them effectively, but there's sometimes we'll add a new piece of technology in and use it for 3 to 4 months, and we really don't know what it means yet.
Right.
But that's okay, and that's more preferred than trying to confuse yourself with all these different data streams. So.
Well, I can definitely speak from experience with that's the best method, is to collect data, and then you'll start to learn to ask the right questions as opposed to just start to jump into conclusions and and trying to present that data even to your athletes. Sometimes you don't know enough yet to really give them good information, and so you've been able to compare an off season to an off season or an in season to an in season. You're just jumping to conclusions a lot of time.
Yeah, and one of my issues, I think, too, is that people will use data and technology just merely to reinforce what they think that they're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing of you have to be open to data, and you have to, we're all trying to create these models, and whether it's quantifying load or quantifying fatigue or quantifying performance, we're all trying to create these models to help us see things better, and they really only work if we begin getting answers to questions that we didn't have to start.
Right.
Then we know the model's working.
Mm-hmm.
And I really I really, sometimes I've dealt with coaches where we talk about this model and they say, well, that's exactly what I thought. That's exactly what my eyes thought, or my eyes saw. And I'll say, well, if your eyes saw it, then we don't really need the technology. If you're that good that you can see everything the technology sees, then we don't need the technology.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
So we're really trying to create models and utilize things to answer questions that we don't really even know we have yet, I think.
Right. What's great about soccer is you're dealing with a lot of different types of athletes, heights and sizes and ages and cultures and things along those lines. What are some recommendations you have for young coaches when trying to jump into a sport like soccer where you're going to deal with that type of population?
Yeah, I mean, I think within our country especially, I mean, I find that most soccer players are overplayed and undertrained. They play a lot. They want to play every day. They don't always want to train with the intensity, especially in the weight room, that they really need to. And I also think that that's also the context that a lot of soccer coaches take on as well, is they also want to overplay and then not really. They'd rather play an extra 20 minutes than do a very kind of concise metabolic drill and then go in the weight room and do the right work.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've tried to stress that even with our coaching staff at times, is that the understanding that if we start taking out some of the non-soccer metabolic work and not be in the weight room as much, is that I'm trying to do that work for them to bulletproof the athlete so they can do more work on the field. And we start taking away that work, we're actually making them more likely to get injured. So I think that culture is there, and I think that at the same time, if the strength coach that's not used to working with soccer players is about to work with a soccer team, they have to be mindful of that, and that. I always see our strength coaches that have to work with soccer players, and they just talk about how weak soccer players are, and they don't want to lift, and they don't like it, and those are all true. But the soccer coaches and players don't necessarily want to hear that.
Yeah.
And to be quite fair, I mean, there are certain positions where more aerobic guys do a lot better. You might have, like we actually have kind of this sweet spot for our midfielders. Or most of our midfielders are roughly 156 to 165 pounds, because that's almost optimally what you need to be. If you need to run a lot, you need to be fast, and you still need to cover 7-8 miles a game.
Right.
And so putting an extra 15 pounds of muscle on that guy, that may help them be explosive in the first part of games, but over the course of the season, that might not be the right thing for them.
Sure.
Now, I mean, if they're 150 pounds and 6 feet tall, that might very much be the right thing for them. But there's that balance. There's that balance, and I think, again, going back to kind of Joel Jameson's book, where he talks about that as well, where being I guess matching your strength profile to the profile of your specific position. I think a central defender, a striker within soccer, being more powerful is almost always going to be a better thing, even if you add a little bit of weight on. And that's the interesting thing with soccer is a midfielder might have is going to tend to be more aerobic. Over the course of the season, especially these aerobic athletes, over the course of the season, they do actually tend to lose their power, so they do definitely need to be in the weight room. But it's got to be a balance of those. Also tend to be the guys that are most beat up from the games as well, because they are so aerobic and are covering so much distance. So it's but then unlike, let's say football, where positionally the practice sessions can be very different depending on position. Many soccer coaches go to a practice session and everyone does the same thing, when the actual profile of the athletes are quite different, as you say.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, I know you've had crazy travel this last couple of days here, so I want to get you going. But we always end the show with a favorite quote. So give me something that's plastered on your wall somewhere, or something that you live by.
I love the quote, and somehow I guess I said it on another podcast of train as hard as you should, not as hard as you can. I think that's extremely valuable, especially for us of trying to maintain guys' fitness over a 10-month season. So that's the one quote that I think is more most important for our league, anyways.
Yeah. So when you're sitting in all these airports and you're doing all this traveling, you're surfing the web, you're dealing with your phone, and you're reading. Give me a book, app, and website recommendation.
I've referenced Joel's book a couple times in this this conversation. I think Joel Jamison's book and the conditioning for MMA is fantastic, and it's not specific really to MMA at all when you get down to the principles of metabolic training. So I think that's a must read. I think it's a must read for every young strength coach.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of kind of data books. I know Ben Alamar just came out with a book, Data Analytics for Sport, that I think is interesting, because I think as a strength coach profession, we are dealing with data more, and I like Ben Alamar's book because it's really how to communicate those metrics, let's say, to coaches effectively.
Yeah. That's good.
I like that one a lot. Websites, and I think Mladen Jovanovic websites, the complementary training.com, I think is fantastic, because he's a guy that I think gets it as well. He's super bright, super strong, very good in the weight room. He's dabbling some in the data side now as well, and always is some really, really good kind of stimulating insight in his data, or in his website. Obviously I love strengthcoach.com. I think that's also kind of a must read for most young strength coaches, with Mike Boyle and everything he's done for our profession.
Absolutely.
App. I do really like the new FMS app. I think that's important for all of us that are FMS certified, to look at some of the information's driven on there. So it's probably what I would recommend across the board.
Those are all great. Well, buddy, I know you've been going at it, and I appreciate you coming on with us and spending a little time. I know you have a conference you do each year, don't you?
Right. Yeah.
Anything you got going on? Now's the time.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. No. So we are. Actually, we're very excited about it. We are hosting the 4th annual Sounders FC Sports Science Weekend here, June 12th to 14th, here in Seattle. Information about it is on the Sounders website, as well as I try to update everyone on Twitter and on Facebook as well. We've got 8 great presenters this year. Guys, like Eric Corum, who's with the University of Kentucky football, he's coming out to present. Chad Gerhard, who's head of sports scientist for US Ski, he's coming out as well. They're doing some really unique things. Patrick Ward from Nike is coming out. We've got Kenny McMillan, who's actually coming over from the Aspire Institute over in Qatar. He's coming out to present. A couple of European guys as well. One guy, sports scientist from Ajax Amsterdam, assistant coach from Fulham in the Premier League. It's just really good group of guys. We've got, so far to this point, attendees from NHL, strength coaching staff, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA. And it's just a great, as well as, a bunch of the MLS guys. And I put this on, I started it 4 years ago, because I had, within a week, I had a Pac-12 strength coach call me and say, Dave, you need to talk to my soccer coach. He just doesn't get it, man. He doesn't get it. He doesn't want his guys in the weight room. He wants to do all the strength stuff out in the field, and it's just kind of circuit work on the side of the field, and it's just, he doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. Okay. It just so happened that 3 days later, the head coach for the team, soccer coach, calls me and says, "You need to talk to my strength coach." He doesn't get it. He wants to make all our guys big and bulky so they can't move. All our guys are sore all the time so they can't feel their legs. And I thought, we need to have some sort of environment to get the sport coaches and the strength coaches sitting in the same room, talking the same language, communicating of what we're really trying to get out of training. And again, that kind of integrated process and not working in isolation.
Right.
And it's been, fantastic because we will also have, 5 to 10 head NCAA Division I college soccer coaches there as well.
Yeah.
So it's, I think it's important because I do feel like there's got to be better communication, better understanding between sports coaches and strength coaches, and especially in the collegiate level, strength coaches get so overloaded in terms of the number of athletes they're trying to see and what they're trying to do, and the communication at times is so critical and can go a long ways, but their context and understanding of each other can sometimes be off. So
yeah, I agree 100%.
So it's been a great success. I mean, it's we'll probably have somewhere between 80 to 100 coaches there this year, and we're really looking forward to it. So.
It sounds like a fantastic event. I appreciate you putting that on and continuing to give back to the profession through the things that you do. And so just thanks again for coming on, man, and spend some time with us.
Thanks for having me. And good luck, and thanks for all you do as well. All the Skype interviews have been great. So.
Thanks a lot, buddy. See you.
Okay.
Okay, guys, a couple quick things before we let you go. Don't forget to check out eliteform.com and ignitionapg.com and let them know how much you appreciate them bringing the show to you for free. It was awesome to have David Tenney on the show today. Please join me in the comment section at ronmckeefery.com thanking David for coming on the show and sharing his information with us. All the show notes for this episode and the others with links that were mentioned are on the site as well. While you're there, join the mailing list so that you can get updates on new shows and anything else that I have going on. If you haven't checked out strength-ondemand.com yet, make sure to do so. It's a fantastic resource, and I know you'll love it. Lastly, please subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube, as well as leave a positive rating and review so that we can continue to bring this show to as many strength coaches as possible. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Our Game Chalk Talk. Take care.